The Libertarian State Leadership Alliance presents our 2017 National Conference, The Future of the Libertarian Political Movement. In this panel, Reviving Less Active State Parties, a panel with Darryl Perry, Jake Porter, Joseph Stallcop, and Caleb Dyer.
This is the Reviving Less Active Political Parties panel. I'm Darryl W. Perry. I'm the chairman of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. I'm joined by Jake Porter, who is Executive Director of Libertarian Party of Iowa. And also, this is a very special treat. It's not in your program as such, but we have two sitting Libertarian state reps joining the panel. We have Representative Joseph Stallcop from Keene Ward 1, and we have Representative Caleb Dyer from Hillsborough 37, which I believe is the largest state rep district anywhere in the country. They elect 11 state reps in that district. So I don't really have a lot planned for this panel. I was thinking more, like throw it out for questions. But I'll definitely pass the mic down and get any input from others. But the question that sort of comes to mind that people want answered of like how do you revive a what was an inactive affiliate? Well, there's the saying that showing up is 90% of the job, and I think responding to emails is largely the other 10% of the job. And that's really what happened in New Hampshire, to where right at a year ago, there were 0 county affiliates in New Hampshire. We now have 6 of the counties that are organized into affiliates. Caleb is the secretary of the newest affiliate, or what will hopefully be the newest affiliate. They are organized, have not yet officially petitioned for affiliation. Same thing happened in western New Hampshire with Cheshire and Sullivan counties, to where it's organized, but we've not officially petitioned for affiliation. And Roger Paxton, who was supposed to be on the panel, is not here because of an emergency that came up. He helped organize the first of the affiliates, which is LPC Coast, Rockingham and Stratford counties. That got organized about a year ago. And ever since then, because people are actually getting involved, then the party has grown just, precipitously, and people are getting active, people want to get active, and it's just amazing what happens when people put a little bit of effort. So with that, I'll pass the mic down and then open it up for questions.
Thank you, Darryl. Back around, I've been involved with the Libertarian Party now for a little over a decade, and whenever I actually moved into Iowa, I got involved in the state party had actually split into 2, and actually interesting things happened. Both factions end up leaving, basically, so we're stuck with just a few people. I don't know how you can win something and then also leave, but we ended up going through that, and we had some interesting challenges. We had the Ron Paul campaign, which was very good for us in many respects, but also temporarily bad because it took the few people we had in the party temporarily out. Now they came back. One thing that we did, so this is around the 2007 time, is we had a core group of about 15 people, 10 to 15 people that were doing all the work that stayed around. We took that, and at that time we were getting involved into social media. So we would have a way for people to contact us, which has only grown over the years. Darryl mentioned making sure you're responding to emails. That was where we were failing at. We would respond to emails. We had a problem. We had this old HTML website from 2002 that I was told was a real good way, and it was back whenever they created it, but it had information that couldn't be updated. We had wrong information, so people would send us an email. It wouldn't get to anyone. We couldn't respond to them. We almost lost a candidate for governor. A lady that did run for governor contacts us and says, I want to get involved. I may want to run for office. I want to set up a county affiliate. Email goes nowhere. So getting things like that fixed where people can communicate and you can start to get people involved was one thing that we did and worked very effectively. Now it didn't happen overnight. You know, there's one of those things, you bring new people in, they recruit more people, and now we look at it starting about 2013, we started to have people wanting to form local county affiliates. Now we're up to about 15 that are either officially, now we've got major party status, so we're going to have to go through and find a new way to affiliate these parties. But I think we're going to be around 15 of them by the end of this year of either officially organized county affiliates in the state of Iowa or ones that are in the process of forming. So it's just a lot of little work and also getting candidates to run. That's another key. If you don't have candidates, that doesn't really inspire people to get involved. Candidates bring in a lot of people, and that's where we focused at. So it's always important to have people at all levels of office. You know, local office, you can actually make a change, get elected. And at the higher office, that brings in a lot of publicity and a lot of people and resources that wouldn't otherwise come into the party. Pass the mic on.
Hello there, I'm Joseph Stallcop. I'm currently the state representative for Cheshire 4. And I think one of the valuable things to bring up, because I'm currently a student in college, and I notice this a lot with clubs on campus, is that there's really two big things that need to occur for your club to actually gain attention and increase its members. The first, as you were saying, is its internet presence. Make sure everything's updated. Make sure you're keeping up with technology. So, no HTML 2000 websites. And I think another one, though, is having events. Have events in your community. Bring people in, even if it's not something that's directly involved at the time to politics. I know one thing that really tends to help out a lot is charitable events. So things that can help people out a lot, that tends to bring a lot of good publicity and also does to help out in your community and show that this is a party that is beyond the whole stigma that's given to us a lot of, oh, we're just trying to take funds away from people. No, we really do care about people and we can show the voluntary aspect of this. So by combining these two things together, we really can help increase members and bring attention to our cause.
So I'm Caleb Dyer. I am the state representative for, well, one of 11 for Hillsborough 37. In my experience with, here's a common misconception. In the state of New Hampshire, even the established parties tend to have defunct parties here and there. So in the town of Pelham, the Republican Party was probably 2 people, even though the town is majority Republican and pretty much always votes Republican. But when I first showed up to a Republican Party meeting a while back, it was basically just a handful of people. And no one was doing anything, no one was really inspired to get involved. And actually what Joseph just said a little bit about us doing charitable events, we started a scholarship fund for the local high school. We got active in sponsoring a blood drive that was at the high school. We donated some money to one of the community nursing homes to offset, actually we ended up offsetting the public funds that went to the nursing home, which was fantastic. So we did a lot of things like that to kind of get our names out there, show that we were active in the community, doing things that were making positive change, that were in the direction that we already wanted them to go, politically speaking. So there are a lot of great ways to revive a party in that way that has nothing to do with policy, that has everything to do with just reaching out to members of the community. And the discussion about policy can come later in your actual meetings. But first and foremost, the goal of a political party, I think, or the goal of a local political party, a local affiliate, should really be exactly that, community outreach. Because once you build a network of people that you can connect together, that becomes the asset. And then once you start changing hearts and minds by, influencing them of you know, how you see a particular issue, that's where the real change starts to happen, and that's when you start to get people excited about a candidate that thinks that same way. In a way, we're capitalizing on this herd mentality that we all kind of don't like, but that is the game of politics, and that's kind of what the LP is designed to do. We're designed to educate more so right now. In the future, I hope that we'll be able to run and win candidates. But as it stands, we need to really grow those local networks. And I think the best way to do it, as Joseph said, is starting that community outreach really early on in the cycle. Like I said, scholarship funds, donating to local causes, you know, anything you can do, just local fundraisers. It all is so valuable, and people, you know, especially in the Libertarian Party, often overlook that.
So, Caleb, can you talk a little bit about, since you were part of the organization to just create the Southern New Hampshire Libertarians, could you talk a little bit about what went into getting that organization created and you know, any sort of plans you guys might have?
So at our founding meeting, we were at Fody's Tavern in Nashua, and we had actually had a meeting there, not the SNHLP, but we had kind of like a loose discussion that had occurred there where I was the featured speaker, and Linda Keene had organized that of the Granite State Libertarians, and I was kind of there as the peacemaker, because I'm not a Granite State Libertarian. That's kind of one of the other offshoots before the Libertarian Party started to reconsolidate itself here in this state. So I was kind of the peacemaker of that discussion. And then we decided at that discussion, which wasn't very well attended, it was only like maybe 6 people strong, we decided at that meeting that we were going to try to start to form some kind of Southern New Hampshire Libertarian Party. And, you know, it encompasses the counties of Hillsborough and Merrimack. So not the 2 most populous counties, but one of them is the most populous county. So we, at that meeting, made that decision with only about 6 people in the room. And then we, you know, had some loose discussion thereafter about, you know, when are we going to schedule the next meeting, and no one really knew what to do. Justin O'Donnell actually headed a lot of that up. Justin O'Donnell took a little bit of initiative on that, and he ended up setting up a meeting. We got in touch with Linda, and we then got in touch with Fody's to kind of bring in people from Hillsborough County to, you know, to actually come and make it happen. And for the second meeting, I think we got, I don't know, it was definitely over 10 people. I don't know if it was quite 20, but it was significantly more than the 6 that had showed up to the first one, which wasn't even dedicated for that purpose of setting up a county affiliate. And then, so, you know, we had about 15 people in the room, and we had, you know, rudimentary elections, and we passed a rough bylaws that we had kind of plagiarized from LPC Coast. And yeah, so it was a very smooth and quick process, but we had brought in, between that first meeting and that second meeting, we had brought in a lot of people just by reaching out to people like, Eric Eastman didn't actually show up, but he does live in Nashua. He's a former Republican state rep that actually just switched to the Libertarian Party not too long ago. So yeah, there's another one other than Joseph. Did you hear about that, Darryl, or that Eric Eastman had switched?
Yeah, he told me at Joseph's.
Oh yes, the press conference. That makes sense. But anyhow, so we reached out to a lot of people. Eric Eastman had reached out to a couple people. Jim Grenier, who is, I don't think he's here today, but he actually was very active with the Johnson Weld campaign, and he went out throughout Massachusetts, where he just recently, you know, moved from. He had been out, and I had actually met Jim in Lowell. I had a gig with the band that I play in, and I had actually met Jim walking around the streets of Lowell during the kinetic race. And, you know, he had his Johnson Weld t-shirt on, and I came up to him and I said, oh, you know, I see you support Johnson Weld. And at that time I was still running as a Republican. But little did I know I would come and meet Jim, and he would become the chairman of the Southern New Hampshire Libertarian Party, you know, just 6 months later. So, you know, it's cool stuff like that, that you build a network that you don't quite realize exists. You know, and that's essentially how it kind of came together. It was very organic. You know, a lot of people just kind of reaching out to other people who they knew were either of a similar mindset or would perhaps be interested in just challenging the duopoly. You know, we had one kid who is from Bedford who plans to run for office. He actually reminds me a lot of myself. He was in the Model UN Club in his high school. You know, his name's Spencer Diaz, and I had never met him before, but he just showed up to the meeting just because he had heard that, you know, we were having an SNHLP meeting. So if you build a network, they will come. So, you know, don't be afraid to actually, you know, put pencil to paper, write up bylaws, and do it.
So I've got a couple more questions that have come to mind that I'll get feedback from everybody before, again, I do want audience questions. Joseph, I think you were the one that mentioned doing like community outreach, have events, stuff along those lines. When I hear from Jake some of the various things that have been done in Iowa as far as ways to promote the party, and like maybe we can throw out some ideas for let's brainstorm see if we can come up with new ideas. But what's some of the things that have been done in Iowa to sort of grow the brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So the local events are one thing. One of our county affiliates over in what we call the Quad Cities is doing that, and they have helped raise money for one of the homeless shelters they had, and they actually went to fight for them whenever the city tried to shut them down over zoning laws. But before that, they had actually collected food donations for them as well. And so they're trying to be involved in the community. That does bring people in, and also focusing on those local races, the city council races, getting appointed to the local boards where they can actually have an influence over that. And that does build up a network within the community. It brings their friends in as well. So they're able to bring like-minded people they know into the group, and then they end up running for office. And it's still early on, but that is definitely working. You got something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think another big thing would be too is be kind and open to people that come to you, especially people that want to run. I can personally attest that when I had originally ran as a Democrat, I was brought into the party, and they had the mentality, as I said in my speech during my press conference, that if you didn't have a big name and if they didn't know you were doing something big, they really kind of didn't care. I had introductions to a lot of people where it was just like, oh, hey, I was told by another state rep, this is Joseph. And they're like, oh, hi, whatever. And they're like, oh, he's running for state rep. I'm like, oh, hi, how's it nice to meet you? So, like, don't look down on people. Don't see anyone as lesser because they might not be doing something. Treat everyone equally. It really goes a far way.
Yeah, especially if you're a candidate. Don't think you're high and mighty. You're an LP candidate. I'm sorry. Like, for real. Like, no, don't. Absolutely, just be real about it. Treat people like human beings, like you would meet them in a coffee shop. And I still pretty much do that when I meet people. I think I've said to Darryl more times than he'd probably want to hear every time he introduces me as a state rep. I'm just like, Darryl, stop invoking my title. Just don't do that. Titles are BS. It's one of those things is you need to just be humble and, accept that not everyone is going to agree with you, and that your goal is to try to get them to agree with you and try to sell your ideas to them in the most palatable way possible. Like Joseph said, be kind. You're gonna catch a lot more flies with honey than vinegar. And if you're just being openly hostile, like, oh, you support a universal basic income, or you support raising the minimum wage, how dare you? You can't come across like that. You need to kind of sell the policy in terms of, ask them why they support those kind of policies. And then, find out why they support them and offer an alternative. Challenge their ideas, but do so respectfully. That's the way to really change hearts and minds. And ultimately, yes, that's your goal, but your goal first and foremost is to just get them through the door. Because if you can get them through the door, it's almost like building a church. If you can get them through the door, you can then convince them of your dogma, essentially. You've won half the battle. Or actually, that's the whole battle. But getting them through the door is half the battle. So, that is it.
I think another important thing to bring up too is when you meet someone new that you don't know, your goal should be to listen before talking. I feel a common problem in politics is the first time people meet someone else, they immediately start spouting rhetoric, and especially to someone that has been raised against that, their first reaction isn't going to be, oh, I'm interested. Their reaction is going to be to attack you back. I've actually gotten a decent amount of liberal-leaning people on board with my ideas simply because I listened first to what they had to say and then showed them that there was ways to do that without the state involved, and that any program that is established can be revoked with votes, so why not establish things on your own, not involving a system that can fall things apart. And people are pretty open to those ideas. I remember, which was interestingly enough, that some of those people I had talked to, when I had officially committed to the Libertarian Party, I had some people that were involved with Democratic organizations that started attacking me on my Facebook wall because of this. And a lot of those people I talked to actually came to my support and said, hey, this is still someone who cares a lot about people, and if he's doing things through different means, then that should still be a good thing. So remember, even if they don't seem like an ally to begin with, if you treat people like people and you show them other ways, you can have a lot more allies than you'd expect.
Yeah, I want to speak about bringing people into the party as well. So my experience, I've been trying to recruit people and doing so for 10 plus years. And maybe only 10 to 20% of them actually stay involved. Maybe some of them, they do become registered. They vote for our candidates. They may share something on Facebook. They may not be involved at any level more than that. But there's these super activists that you run into and that you end up recruiting, and maybe it's the 5 or the 10% of them that end up becoming, the next state chair, which has happened in Iowa. Somebody I brought in because I talked to him on the phone for 2 hours whenever he told me he was interested in volunteering, and I just let him talk. And then I ended up meeting him, and he gets involved and becomes very active. You also recruit candidates, your next executive committee or central committee that you have. And just by listening to people, I think as they point out, not harassing them at first, just giving them time to come over, and eventually you end up finding the super activists, the next candidates, and they will recruit more people of their own. That's what's happened in Iowa. James has recruited the state chair, so I helped recruit him. He's recruited more people than I ever could, and the people he's recruiting are recruiting people. That's the kind of compounding effect that we will have as long as we don't think, well, that person's not really going to help me, we're not going to contact them back, or that person, I don't want to waste my time with that. Eventually, if you treat everyone with that respect that comes to the party, you will find those super activists, and some people will really surprise you.
And we've got a question.
So it sounds like connecting with the broader audience where they are at, not where you are at, is the key to it. Yeah. So what are some of the typical leading questions that you would ask to find out where they are at?
So I'm going to repeat that in my own words so that the camera picks that up. The question was about when you reach out to people, you want to meet them where they're at, not where you're at. So what are some of the questions that you would ask to find out where they might stand? And this, I'm glad you asked the question because it allows me to bring up something that I had jotted down before you ever asked the question, which is outreach booths. And I know that there are a lot of state affiliates that will do outreach booths at various fairs. Funny story about fairs that I'll try to get back to without going too far off on a tangent. But there's this amazing thing called the world's smallest political quiz that the advocates for self-government, they wind up doing this thing called Operation Politically Homeless, to where you can get this kit and you've got a 2-foot by 3-foot Nolan chart, and you ask people, here's the questions, and then they figure out where they stand on that diamond shape. So that's one way that you can do it. And then, that also allows you to have this set series of questions, and then when somebody, I'm not really sure I understand this particular question, and then you can go into some of the nuance on certain things. So it allows more topics instead of just walking up to somebody and saying, what do you think about taxation? Which, nothing wrong with asking someone what they think about taxation, but a lot of it has to do with how the things are said. There's a wonderful video that I think it was Doug Scribner from Minnesota put together several years ago, titled, How Not to Run a Libertarian Outreach Booth. Watch that video, and if you're a libertarian, you'll find it absolutely hilarious. But it's all the things you don't do at a libertarian outreach booth that I'm fairly certain if you've ever been to a libertarian outreach booth, you've seen somebody do. But I definitely think that the world's smallest political quiz allows those introductory questions, and then it allows for more of a natural conversation to where people can ask questions about particular questions. And then I'll go now.
I've ran for office a few times, and one thing that I've always tried to do was simply ask people, their name. You can give them the handshake, look them in the eye, compliment them on something. The politician's handshake, right? You got to do that every time. You got to find something to. But in all seriousness, I ask people how they're doing, and a lot of times people just want to know, first of all, that you're listening to them. That's the key thing right there. Then that kind of takes them to where they're not combative with you. And then they will start to talk. I used to do job interviews at managed retail stores. The way I would handle job interviews is I would just let people talk. I figured the bad people, the bad employees would eliminate themselves if they talked long enough. And I didn't have to ask any questions. It was easy for me. But it's the same way of dealing with voters. You can find out a lot of what motivates them just by letting them talk and asking them what issues are important to them. Finding out a little bit of information about them and then remembering it and using it in conversation, I think is really helpful. Just connecting individually with each person that you encounter, whether it be an activist that's coming into the party or whether it be even an opponent. That's another thing too. So I've ran for office a few times, and some of my opponents absolutely hated me, and that's okay because I trolled them really bad. But some of them absolutely, they would work with me. And I was running for Secretary of State, and I was very happy that the Democrat actually called me up one day and said, well, you're driving through town, come over and stop by my campaign headquarters. And we actually discussed policy and issues that he ended up stealing my issues, which I'm okay with that. As long as my ideas get adopted, I'm fine with that. I think he was able to campaign on him. Now, he lost, I lost obviously as well, but ended up the Republican that did win did adopt a couple, not a lot, but a couple of those ideas that we had ended up campaigning on. So that was building an alliance that's been pretty important. In the same way with our voter registration issues we had, I had to build alliances up. The state of Iowa was not registering people as libertarians whenever they would actually, but it was a data issue. It wasn't anything, it was incompetence. It wasn't that they were intentionally not registering. They had an error that they just didn't care about fixing. But we had to make some alliances within the Iowa legislature, and it got fixed almost overnight. So it's treating other people with respect, even your opponents, even people that disagree. And another thing I found that's very interesting, it happens. So I've ran for office off and on since 2010. A lot of the people that hated me in 2010 are now supporters. They've actually came over and became libertarians, something they never thought they would do. Just by talking to them for years and years and years, they end up coming over. Maybe it's one issue, maybe it's the drug war this year they come over, maybe it's changing spending on an issue, and slowly they come over to our issues and become libertarians themselves.
I think one of the biggest points to make too, and this really helps because there is a stigma on libertarians and any group that actually kind of has a backbone and isn't just going to slide to either side depending on what people want. Be calm and be rational. Don't get overexcited, because that is what the other side is pretty much going to be pushing that we are. They're going to be like, oh, they're just a bunch of these fringe people yelling at the sky about stuff. I think one of the greatest events that, though it wasn't libertarian, I appreciated it, was the Keene State Republicans actually put on an event called Breaking the Stigma, and they talked about their ideas and conservative values. And for Keene State College, as many of you probably know, is a very liberal school. So this is not a big club, and they, like, when I was going to this, I was just like, the audience is going to try to take their heads off. Well, most of the audience was calm and courteous, just as they had been. They listened. They got a lot of good ideas. And the ones who actually turned out to be over enthusiastic were the couple of protest people in the crowd that were asking questions, trying to start fights, essentially. And as I'm watching this, you have like these groups of protesters that are like saying, well, you're doing this and trying to do this to people, and the audience is looking, and then you have the people on stage that are just like calmly responding, saying, well, we don't necessarily agree on this. And what the audience took from that was that these were the calm and rational people on stage, and the people we thought we aligned with are the ones freaking out. So if you can really show us to be like relaxed people that can directly answer a question and not scream in your face about it, that goes a far way, because most people aren't overly excited about politics. They're not going to be jumping at things. So they tend to go closer to the like calm people that have answers and are prepared, versus the people that are yelling at others saying, why are you destroying everything right now?
So to answer your question more directly, what questions do you ask? The questions don't matter at all. Seriously, there is not one single question nor a group of questions that is actually like the set of questions to ask. Like, pretty much all of us, or at least, you know, all three of you guys up to this point, have not focused on what questions, but the fact that you're asking questions at all, showing that you're listening. That is valuable, that in and of itself. So you can ask them a question about, you know, you can even ask them, what is taxation? Or, you know, to you, what is taxation? Or how do you feel about taxation? Any variant of that question. Provided you do so in a way that is non-accusatory, in a way that is receptive to whatever they say, even if it's something you disagree with. It's more important that if you disagree with them, you challenge them respectfully, calmly, and rationally, just as Joseph described. It never matters what the question is, as long as you do those three things. So that's, you know, I think that's the best way to sum up the question and answer it directly, you know, because they gave you what I would think better answers than mine, but, you know, I just wanted to, you know, hammer that home.
I think one more important thing too is treat people equally. So treat the strongest libertarian that comes up to you just like the strongest Marxist that comes up to you. Doesn't matter where they fall along. This is a person. This isn't a political view. We got to distinguish those.
So let me, I'm getting some kind of signal from the back.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I heard various activities mentioned that a party would do, such as outreach, fundraising, education, finding candidates, supporting candidates. In an ideal party, what would be the mix of, let's say, percentage of time that a party should spend in these activities? And I know it can be variable depending on the situation, but let's say a new party was spending 80% of its time doing education. Is that a successful startup party? So I just want to get a feel for if a new group were to form, where, you know, what should be a reasonable allocation of their effort amongst those various types of activities?
So again, I'll repeat the question so that the camera picks it up. We've mentioned a lot of different things. So outreach, education, candidate recruitment. So what sort of mix of, you know, allocation of, you know, How much time should be spent on candidate recruitment? How much time should be spent on outreach? How much time should be spent on education, etc.? And I think a lot of it has to do with what time of year. So if it's during the candidate filing period, finding candidates should be your top priority. If it's 2 months after candidate recruitment period and it's campaign season, you should no longer try to be finding candidates. That's when you do your education of letting voters know, here are our candidates, here's what we believe. During the quote-unquote off year, that's when you should be doing the outreach, to where you bring people into the party so that hopefully next year when it's election time, they can get involved as either a candidate, campaign staff, campaign volunteer, some kind of outreach and education. So a lot of it, as I see it anyway, depends on the time of year. Just like, if you're preparing for Christmas, you're not really going to be doing that right now. You're going to wait until like November when it's the appropriate time to begin thinking about Christmas.
Being from Iowa, I remember a few years ago, and I think the first time Ron Paul was running for president, there was an article that wrote to be young and in love with Ron Paul. And it had some young supporters that traveled in by bus, and this Liberty bus, you can imagine how that was. And they get there, and Christmas Eve, they go knocking on doors. And people, I just want to get home with my family. I don't want to talk about Ron Paul. So, part of that, I think, as Darryl says, making sure it's the right time of the year, the right place to do that is critical. As far as what percentage should be, that's a difficult question. A lot of our groups are still small enough that we kind of have to do, because they're all volunteers, they're not paid at those levels, what interests them. If education interests them, that's probably what they're gonna focus on, at least at first until they recruit people. I would say, though, that making sure that we always remain in contact, whether it be in person, having meetings, regular meetings, whether it could be just a social meeting. That's what a lot of groups are doing now. That's working very well to get people in. And then later on, from those social groups, they actually form groups that do recruiting, that do advertising, where they get somebody let's say you get somebody that's really interested in local media, knows it very well. That person interested in it focuses on that, while other people that are really interested in the education work of it focus on that. And maybe some people will also want to run for office or network with those that are in local political office as well. So I think it does go back to what the individuals in the group, whenever you're first starting, what they're good at, what they like to do, and always maintaining contact with people, whether it be through social media, having those regular groups, bringing more people in. That way you can fill all those areas. But also, as Darryl says, making sure you're doing things seasonally whenever it's time. Not necessarily out there, always be looking for new talent, new candidates, but maybe not push that until you get a little bit closer to the election.
Yeah, I can agree with both of you on the points you made. As of all the problems I have with them, the one thing I can say about the Democrats is that during presidential seasons, they are very aggressive with their tactics on getting people involved. One of the things I've learned is your first and foremost goal is to just reach people. So talk to people, have those outreach events, see where they lie along the line, and see if you can get information. So a email address is one of the greatest things, or get them to like a Facebook page. From there, you can start getting deeper into situations like volunteering for the party, or seeing if people that want to run as a candidate or get more involved. But I think first, just learn about people and try to get them drawn in. Don't go directly into saying, hey, do you want to get volunteer for this party? Because if people don't know about it, they're just going to be like, sure. Like, just slowly get people in, get to meet people, get to know them, and then bring them along the process. I think that all the points you made could be done simultaneously. So just make sure though that you know where the person's at that you're getting involved with, so you know what direction to put them in.
So to try to most directly answer the question of allocating resources and time, obviously, as been said previously, there's no set method to doing that. But if you're just starting, you want to, one, pick a time to start your party. Preferably, I'd actually say try to start right before the election, even though that sounds really bad. But if you're just starting a party, do outreach events right before the election, even if you have no candidates, even if you have nothing to offer the voter. Say that, basically do outreach events, tabling, whatever you have to do. Find voters who are discontent with the options that they have. And, start your outreach then. And then on the off year, some states have elections every 4 years, some have them every 2, like New Hampshire. Everyone in the entire state is elected every 2 years. So in our case, if you start a party affiliate, or if you start a state level party even, try to start right before the election happens, ideally right before the primaries happen, so that you can find discontent voters, identify people who either don't vote or voted but were unhappy about who they voted for, and try to convince them that there is a better way, there's a better set of principles out there. And then over time, that's where you do not only recruitment for the people in your party, but also the future candidates. Like you were saying, out in Iowa, they've recruited people who they didn't even expect would be candidates, who just kind of decided to do that on their own. People will kind of figure out themselves what they want to do. Your job is to allow that to happen. So, right in the beginning, it's 100% outreach when you first start up. Then it slowly shifts to, finding from within your membership who you want to try to get to run for office. So that's where candidate recruitment might come in. And education is going on throughout this whole process. Obviously, your entire outreach process is going to basically be education of voters. That, hey, we're out here, we are planning to run candidates. Maybe we don't have candidates right now, but we're at least planning to run candidates. And here's who some of them are, and here's what we support. So education's going on throughout, but in terms of your outreach is going to be what is going to breed your candidates. So you want to, in the beginning, be starting all on outreach, everything on outreach and education, and candidate recruitment will follow. But if it's the same for building any organization, it actually holds true. Political parties are no different than like an Odd Fellows group or a Masonic lodge. To get people in, to get new members, you need to go out and talk to people. A perfect example is when I petitioned the lodge that I'm now a member of in Pelham. They had a table out at the old home days in my town, where I just talked to them, and my father happens to be a Mason and stuff like that. So just tabling events and doing all that stuff is just a great way to just find new people to do good things. So
I think he brought up a really good point, is the topic of relevancy. So when you do these events right around the time of elections, people have politics on their mind, because as a political science major, one thing we talk about is that the average voter has really no care for politics until A, the elections, or B, there is a politician in that is so bad it has drawn their attention away from everything else. So outside of our current political system right now, the biggest thing that's going to be is bring it up right around the time that people are actually thinking about politics, because if you really convince and sway them enough that they get involved, like the page on Facebook, things like that, you'll actually be able to captivate their attention even when politics isn't the talk of the town.
So let's go back to the outreach booths real quick so that I can tell that rather interesting story about a hurdle that, or rather a big giant roadblock that LP New Hampshire ran into recently in trying to set up at a county fair, where I submitted the application on behalf of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, and a few days later I had not heard back from the fair, so I tried calling and got a message, our office is closed at 1:30 p.m. Okay, that's rather annoying. I guess I'll call you tomorrow. So I called the next day and was told, oh, we've set that application off to the side. You need to contact the president of the Cheshire Fair. And I was given her cell phone number and her home phone number. Called, left messages on both. No response. A few days later, still no response, so I asked the secretary of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, Gilletta, can you do me a favor and call the lady that runs the Cheshire Fair and try to find out why our application was set off to the side and what's going on with that? And so Gilletta called, left messages, no call back for a couple of weeks, and then somehow she was able to get a hold of the lady, and she was informed that because I, the chairman of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, am a quote-unquote known associate of Free Keene, which is a website that reports on various things that happen, I am not welcome to get a booth or to work a booth at the Cheshire Fairgrounds because Free Keene was banned from the Cheshire Fair because of hopscotch. You heard that right, hopscotch. A couple of years ago there was a Free Keene booth and somebody from the Republican Party had the idea of let's draw hopscotch and then it slows people down, and because the Republicans did it, Ian Freeman, who was running the Free Keene booth, said, that's a brilliant idea, chalk to hopscotch. The only people that were banned were Free Keene. The Republicans are still welcome to table at the Cheshire Fair. The Democrats are still welcome to table at the Cheshire Fair. But the Libertarians are not because they are known associates of someone who has been banned. So that's one of the hurdles that we're facing as far as even being able to do outreach booths at various fairs. Now, I realized a few minutes ago that we have New Hampshire and Iowa represented here, and anybody that pays any attention to politics understands the significance of these two states. Iowa having the first caucus and New Hampshire having that first in the nation primary. So any thoughts on ways that libertarians could capitalize on the added attention that gets paid attention to these early states with those primaries and caucuses?
I've always been, every time someone speaks in both Iowa and New Hampshire, it always gets the rumor started they're running for president, so I'd like to make a special announcement right here. One thing, it's going to be really interesting now because in Iowa we got major party status, so which means we can hold caucuses. Now, of course, the caucuses have to be non-binding. We can't attach delegates or else we would lose our national party affiliation for it. But we still can do that, and there is the possibility of getting some added press for it. One thing that we've looked at doing is we can hold our caucus date on a different date than Democrats and Republicans and try to get free media out of that, try to get the presidential candidates from the Libertarian Party into Iowa, hold our non-binding caucus, and see if we can get some media coverage on that. Part of the issue, and it always hurts the Libertarian Party there, is that you have a few months that people will register back over with either the Democrats or Republicans. Now, a lot of times they register back the same, the next day you're able to do that there, and they'll switch back to being Libertarian, but it usually costs us a couple percentage of registered voters though. So that is an issue. With us having major party status, we now have our own primaries though, and if we can get people to run against each other in the primaries, get people interested in our own internal elections or who we're going to run, that may solve some of that issues. But as far as how that goes, it'd be a very great question. I hope to at least there have the non-binding.
I think a good thing to mention about New Hampshire is seeing as this is a very political.
About 5 minutes max.
Gotcha. Yeah, since this is a very political state during the primary season, looking at what other candidates are doing in terms of getting involved with people, I know that there's some spots in Keene personally. There's Lindy's Diner that every candidate that is quoted to supposed to win like has to go there. So like find those spots that people are going politically and show your presence too. Show that there's more than just beyond that little sphere. And it really shows by doing that that you have that local mentality that you're not, which is an issue that at least I've seen personally with the Democrats running into, is that they're not this like high up force coming down from DC to like try to get voters, that we really are a grassroots movement.
So there are a couple logistical, problems with capitalizing on the primaries and the caucuses in, New Hampshire and Iowa. And that is that none of the delegates to the national convention can be bound by the state. So, we are never going to have a primary that coincides on, the first week in February like we always have it in New Hampshire. Our primary is always going to be sometime thereafter in the presidential cycle. So we can have our primary simultaneously. It's a private primary, obviously, for the presidential primary for us. But we should have it probably around the same time, in February, so that we can capitalize on at least the timing effect. And I'm sure that Iowa, you guys, as you've said, you're interested in doing a similar thing. Obviously it's not the same effect as when people actually go to the polls or go to caucus and actually, cast a vote. But it's something that we should absolutely consider doing, at least here in New Hampshire. So, Chairman Perry, you should get on that.
Well, if the Libertarians retain ballot access next year, then we will be forced by the state to have that primary.
No, you're wrong. Presidential primary.
My reading of the statute, my conversation with the Secretary of State, is that every party that is recognized as a political party has primaries. There is no opt-out. Now, whether or not any candidates file for the primary is going to be a different question. But we could certainly have our own private sort of straw poll.
Yeah, right, exactly. And because we can't have bound delegates, it's actually not, it's probably, even if the state tried to force us to have a presidential primary, it probably isn't lawful because it goes directly against our bylaws.
Right, they can't bind our delegates, but
Yeah.
they will force us to have a primary.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So even if it does force us to have a primary, we can still nominate, whoever the delegates at convention are, and the delegates, I would say, are, a higher form of the party. So all we'd have to do is submit a list of delegates that they're voting for whichever candidate that files, and just have that list of delegates be as long as how many delegates are in the state. There are plenty of ways to just, totally, even if they force us to have a primary, just say, this is our list of delegates. If you cast for a Libertarian candidate, guess what? You voted for all those delegates. So, that's the easiest way to get around that. But one way or another, we definitely need to consider capitalizing on that. And I understand why you wanted to close the primary convention, Darryl, but it hurts us in the long run in terms of, there are 40% of the voters of the state that are undeclared voters. We can't access those voters if we don't have, access to that primary and ballot access. So, but anyhow, I don't know how much time we have left.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh, well, anyone else?
Oh,
Question?
so you're short on time, but the general question, how can state level, or for that matter, the LSLA and national level, best support rebuilding county?
The LSLA. Okay, so the question is, how can the LSA help, rebuild county affiliates or even state parties, I assume, if they're defunct. The LSLA can do trainings like this. Actually, this is probably a great way to, help build county affiliates. Like New Hampshire still doesn't have a county affiliate for Grafton co-ops or Carroll co-ops. So that's something that's going to need to happen, and we're going to have to reach out to people in those counties. We have a couple people in Grafton, but I'm pretty sure we have no one in co-ops. So the LSLA can, reach out to people if they know anyone in those areas of a state where there's no county affiliate. You can donate. Right now, obviously, if there's no one to donate to, that becomes a problem, so it's got to be a kind of people first thing. But those two things, the LSLA, getting people, just finding people all over, and then perhaps donating if they have the ability to do so.
I've got one thought on this, and it's something that I actually was speaking to the Secretary of State about a couple days ago because I would love to have access to, and that is the voter list. It would cost about $8,000 to get that list from the Secretary of State. I've heard that there are third-party vendors that may or may not be able to provide that data a lot cheaper, even though my reading of New Hampshire statute is it's illegal for them to do so with the New Hampshire data. So if the LSLA or National LP could somehow help parties get that data cheaper in places like New Hampshire where it's very expensive, Alabama it's very expensive, two of our neighbors it is free, Massachusetts and Vermont that data is free, Maine it's very cheap, I'm not sure what it is in Iowa, $10 in Iowa, so if we could get access to that a lot cheaper, that would be wonderful, and I believe we are now out of time. And thank you everyone for showing up or watching this online.
The Libertarian State Leadership Alliance presents